What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a Genesis reaction to the album Abacab, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Trucker Kev. Thank you, Trucker Kev. Guys like Trucker Kev make this channel go, guys and girls. So if you'd like to support us in any way, check out our Patreon link below, or the Patreon link on the end screen. We greatly appreciate it. We could not do this channel and put out content every single day without you. All right, let's jump into this thing. Trucker Kev knows a ton about music. I don't know this album at all. I do know one song on it. We don't have any Genesis full albums up, right? So I'll get into Kev's stuff. I've got a bunch of research on it. We're going to jump into this album. Kev says from 1981, coming on strong off the heels of his first solo album, Face Value, original drummer, vocalist Phil Collins, along with two others continuing on. Abacab, he said, this is an album that pretty much, like many releases after The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway after Peter Gabriel left the band, still divides many people in Genesis camps, although it got very favorable reviews from the critics for the most part, and it definitely did. There are those that love it, there are those that hate it. There's really not a whole lot in the middle of the road. I've noticed that with Genesis people. There's kind of like Gabriel people and post-Gabriel people, right? You're Gabriel or you're Phil, kind of. Phil, Mike, and Tony Banks were still keeping everything going, although there was a difference here. There was a lot more pop elements coming into play that were showing through Phil's solo work on Face Value. One of the most notable things, too, are the electronic drums, and not only would he foray into, but also with Eric Clapton and many more produced their albums, and they would request him to play on them for the great production and for the electronic drums he used. In fact, most of Clapton's catalog through the 80s consists of Phil Collins produced and played on. Now, what's interesting in that, right, is Phil's a great drummer, and he was one of the first ones to use the electronic drums, and he does, and here there's some songs where they have both. Former member Steve Hackett says if he could play on any Genesis album that he missed out on, he says he would have loved to have played guitar on this album. That's high praise. This is an excellent album, still holds up very well, and yes, I do admit there are a lot of pop elements in it, but there's also still a few tips of the hat to the prog elements of the originality of the band, especially noticeable in the extended full version of the title track, which will be the first song we get to, Abacab, and the very unique Dodo / Lurker, which really tips the hat to their prog roots, along with the absolute moving and flowing Me and Sarah Jane. Two massive top 40 hits were found from this album, The Man on the Corner and No Reply at All, driven by the horns that Phil really loved. Sussudio, anybody? Sussudio from his mid-80s album. Kev says it's still a strong album, very enjoyable for him. He's got a lot of favorites on it. We'll get to those favorites at the end. We're not going to cheat and go for it. My quick facts. 11th studio album released in September of 81 by Charisma Records. After the 1980 tour in support of their album Duke, the band took a break before they reconvened in 1981 to write and record a new album. It's the first Genesis album recorded at The Farm, a recording studio bought by the group in Surrey. It marks the band's development from their progressive roots into more accessible and pop-oriented songs, which is what Kev was talking about, and their conscious decision to write songs unlike their previous albums. It received a mostly positive reception from critics, was a commercial success, being their second #1 LP on the UK charts, and their first to reach the top 10 in the US. It went to number 7. Certified gold in the UK, double platinum in the US. Boys and girls, that means 2 million copies sold. It was recorded in 14 weeks, and it typically worked between 12 and 14-hour days while making it. The new studio environment had a productive effect on the writing process, and they had enough material for a double album, but they discarded 1 hour of music because they considered the songs were too similar to their past albums. Though the band did not alter the way in which they approached the songwriting for this album, Banks said a conscious effort was made by the group to avoid Genesis cliches, such as using tambourines during a chorus, reprises, extended solos, lengthy instrumental passages, and keeping melodies simple, which signaled further changes in their direction. Because of this, Banks considered Abacab to be the least technical Genesis album at the time of its release, because they were doing highly technical albums with their prog stuff in the 70s, right? Rutherford said the omission of songs that were too familiar to what they had done previously was required to avoid Genesis becoming a caricature of itself, and so the change in direction was therefore necessary. And I always admire artists that do this, right? Because it would have been easy to stay with what they were successful with, but you're going to go away, right? You're going to fade, especially as competitive as the music business was in the 70s and 80s. So you got to change with the times. It doesn't mean you're selling out, but you do have to evolve, and this definitely works out for them in the long haul. Collins said the group adopted what they had done for Duke and took it further for Abacab, specifically with the group improvisational jams and writing with the aid of electronics such as a drum machine, as Kev said. The home studio allowed the group to stop working on a track if a rehearsal failed to produce any desired results and switch to another, which was not possible at a professional facility due to the limited time available. And I think people don't even understand, no matter how juiced you are, Even the Beatles dealt with this. Now, on a few albums they didn't, right? But most of their albums they even dealt with. You have limited studio time, man. And so you got to hurry up. So you might not get everything like you want. And so much has to be fixed in post-production. With them having their own recording studio, like I said, they took 14 weeks. They were in 12 to 14-hour days. I mean, they had time to put into their craft. The band's shift in direction was also underlined in their production with the departure of producer and engineer David Henschel, who had worked with them since 1975. He was replaced by Hugh Padgham, who had worked with Collins on Face Value. It marked the first time Genesis produced an album on their own. Padgham was credited as their engineer. Abacab is formed of 9 tracks, 6 of which are group written, with the remaining 3 solo credited to one of each of the members, which obviously I'll mention those when we get there. The group decided to have the album consist mostly of collective songs, as they thought such tracks became the strongest on Duke. And look, listen, we know Lennon's solo work, we know Paul's solo work. Together is better 99.9% of the time because you got somebody checking you going, no. For the album covers interesting. When I was looking at that, I'm like, why do all these album covers look different? 4 different color schemed album covers. 3 were limited editions. In a contrast to previous Genesis albums, the sleeve is absent of lyrics. Banks reasoned this to reducing the emphasis on the words, which he thought had been overdone on previous albums in order to make them a greater part in the album's overall sound. I'll tell you what, the record company hated the album cover. They really had to sell them on it. Well, we're about to jump into this. Before we do, the music won't be in the video, but it will be in a Vimeo link below. Go over there, check this whole thing out with me. We're going to jump into side 1. Thanks again, Trucker Kev. All right, we're going to start this thing out, as you see below, with Abacab, the lead single in the UK, number 9. When its second single in the US went to 26, we'll cover why that's the second single in our next track. Developed from a group jam session, they had been playing along to a looped electronic drum track until the tape they were using to record on ran out. You might be asking yourself, as I did, what does this title mean? Because this is obviously the title of the album as well. Don't worry, I got an answer for you. It was taken from the structure of an early version of the song. Guitarist Mike Rutherford said in an interview in 2006, he said, there are 3 bits of music in Abacab, and we refer to them as Section A, Section B, and Section C. At different times, they were a different order. We start with Section A, and then Section C, and so on. At one point, it's spelled Abacab. You've got the final version where that's not all. It's not that way at all. It's like AC, 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 B, C, U, C, like all these, but that's how we got there. Song's LP version, obviously we're listening to that, has an extended instrumental outro. Of course, for the single, they cut that down, repeated the first verse, and faded out because, you know, if you're listening to the radio, they don't want instrumental stuff unless you're listening to AOR stuff. On this, you got, of course, Tony Banks on the keys, Mike Rutherford on the electric guitar and bass pedals. You got Phil on lead and backing vocals, drums, percussion. You got the EWF horns. They're uncredited, but the sped up horn noises in the ending instrumental section. You want to know who they are? Don't worry. We're going to get to them in a minute. As always, I'll have the lyrics up. Thanks again, Kev. The title track, Abacab. What a masterclass in musicianship, right? You know, America was not going to embrace it. I'm shocked it went to 26, but that's because they cut out the ending instrumental. But the ending instrumental is part of what makes the song so great, right? It's part of the DNA of the song, man. But we just like to butcher those things. I can't speak for the other side of the pond, but in the States, man, we like to butcher stuff with these radio edits, right? And it's not what it was supposed to be. So, man, you take that off, it's just not the same song. So, so well done, right? The drumming on it, low key, was really good. Which, you know, Phil's writing these things or has a part in writing them, and he's the lead singer, and he's gonna bust those drums out. But I mean, the keys, Tony on the keys, just excellent, and then obviously Mike on the guitar and the bass pedals, and you know, just a really good song. I mean, who the heck knows what it's about, right? Maybe this guy who's kind of going through all this stuff mentally a little bit. That's kind of what it seems like. But who knows? It's not about that. But Phil sounds great. And I'll tell you what, Phil Collins gets a lot of hate, and I get it. I mean, I'm telling you, as a child living through the 80s, right, through my teen years, and I know Kev and I are basically the same age, the patron that brought this. You know, we know this. Like, Phil Collins was as big as anybody, like, consistently. He was as big as MJ. He was as big as Prince, like, consistently with a decade presence, because Genesis is going to have a huge album in 1986, but I mean, Phil is going to explode as a solo superstar. He's got duets with people. He's doing movie soundtracks, like Against All Odds. There's this song on this movie called White Nights that had Gregory Hines. Like, he's everywhere, right? And there's only 3 artists in history that have sold 100 million albums as a member of a band and 100 million albums as a solo artist. Both sold 100 million albums, right? And that is Phil Collins, Michael Jackson, and Paul McCartney. So I just want to tell you, this guy was huge. His voice sounds fantastic here. I just had to get that out of the way because I know Phil gets a lot of hate. I'm not saying he's better than Gabriel. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that, like, when people, like, retrospectively want to go in on him, like, this guy was really good. He's a really good vocalist. So that song was fantastic. Can't imagine there being a song on here much better than that. But now we're going to go to the second track, a song that I actually know. I mean, I don't know it great, but I do remember it. No Reply at All. This was the lead single in the U.S. Remember, Abacab was the lead single in the UK. This was the lead single in the US. Not released in the UK at all. The US single release edit, imagine this, omits the second verse of the song as it appears on this album. It spent 18 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100. Only went to 29, but it spent more weeks than most of their songs that reached the top 10, including Invisible Touch, which spent only 17 weeks on the charts, and that was a huge song in 86. Went to 7 in Canada. This song, like Phil Collins' solo track, I Missed Again, recorded it around the same time, makes prominent use of a horn section. I told you we were going to get to this. Arranged by Tom Tom 84, i.e. Thomas Washington, the horn arranger for Earth, Wind, and Fire, and played by that band's wind players, credited on the song as EWF horns. This marked the first instance of Genesis using outside musicians for one of their tracks, since a string section was used on their debut album all the way back in 1969. That one's called From Genesis to Revelation, a very clever album title. The band wanted to emulate the brass keyboard sound that was used on some parts on Duke, remember the previous album the year before in 80. And Collins had used the Phoenix horns on Face Value and suggested to Banks and Rutherford that they use them for the track. Collins thought the horns was a good move to, quote, suddenly jar people and take them off automatic pilot from the predictable ideas they considered Genesis to be. Their involvement created some initial reservations from Banks, but he grew to enjoy the track by the time it was complete. Collins had the idea of writing a song that, quote, the Jackson 5 would have wanted to record, and directed the band in a direction they had never been before. So just so you know, I like to give the instrumentation credits are important. I'll give them to you ahead of time instead of after. Collins on the drum, lead, and backing vocal. Tony Banks on a Yamaha CP70 electric grand piano and a Prophet 5. Rutherford, once again, electric guitar and bass guitar. This time it's Phoenix horns credited for the horns. Same people, man. Let's do this. No Reply at All. The only part I knew on this song was the No Reply at All, right? And I'm surprised when I'm looking at the lyrics that is actually not the chorus, which I always thought it was. The instrumentation on the song is fantastic. It's really the keys, man. It's really Banks on the keys, on the synth, and on that electric piano that are just fantastic, and then the horns are fantastic. I mean, the drumming and the guitar are fine as well, for sure, but Phil gives a great vocal performance here. It's about a girl who, is done with him. She's still in the relationship, but she's checked out. Boys, I'll just speak to the boys. I can't speak for the girls, but most of us have been there, right? Where it's like, they get, your significant other, whoever you're dating, gets real cold, doesn't really have anything to do with you, doesn't care to interact with you, like it's putting her out. That makes you feel great, right? So he's talking about that throughout the song. It's weird, as I talked about, they cut out verse 2 randomly, just on the US edit, because we didn't believe people could handle songs that were 4 minutes long, so it makes no sense to do that. But yeah, there's no reply at all is the way it finishes out each verse, but I always thought that was the chorus. Phil kind of goes down an octave when he's singing it. It has a different feel to it, so I guess that's why it sticks out, and they really punctuate some stuff with the horns. But yeah, not the chorus, but I like that song, man. I think that's a really good song too. Very strong first 2 songs. Now we go to the next track, Me and Sarah Jane. One of the only tracks I have nothing on. Written though by Tony Banks. This is his solo writing credit on this album. Me and Sarah Jane. Wow, that definitely had some prog type of elements to it because it just had so many variations in the song, right? It was just fantastic, man. The musicianship was fantastic. I mentioned when the song started, the song's actually bookended by that electronic drumming, which sounds very similar, like In the Air Tonight. Feels like smash hit. One of the best songs of the 80s, man. One of the most haunting and best. I freaking love that song. It pumps me up, man. If I was ever a boxer, that would have been my walk-out song, man. It's so fantastic. So it had those elements to it. The keyboards on here, unfortunately, it's not credited to everything that Tony's playing because he's playing a variety of things on here. The guitar work, the drumming, but the keys are very, very important here. But that's kind of what you get, right? Because Tony wrote it. So, of course, he's going to write some great keyboard elements in here. But, man, that song is fantastic. They kind of use Tony, because remember Tony wrote it. He kind of uses the weather and different naturally occurring things to kind of frame the story. But halfway through, you realize that our protagonist doesn't even really, this girl doesn't even exist, right? He makes up a name and then all these adventures they were on, but it didn't work out well. But man, that was a really good song. Great first 3 tracks. We got one more track on the A side. You see it, boy. We got Keep It Dark. It was the second single in the UK, went to 33 there. It features the band taking 2 bars of a drum pattern previously recorded and playing the song on top of it. In the DVD interview accompanying the 2007 re-release of the album, Tony Banks said that the idea was that this character had to pretend that he'd just been robbed by people, and that's why he disappeared for a few weeks. And in fact, what had happened was he'd been to the future and gone to this fantastic world where everything was wonderful and beautiful and everything ... But he couldn't tell anybody that because no one would believe him, and the powers that be kept him silent. Okay, I wanted you to know that as we listen to it, kind of the vibe they were coming from. The huge, right? Everybody's on the huge, man. Keyboards for Tony, Phil on the drums, percussion and vocals, Mike on electric guitar and bass pedals. Let's finish out this side 1. Keep It Dark. I had to make a lot of notes on that song, right, as I'm listening to it, because these songs all these songs are complex as far as musicianship wise. So you got to kind of try to keep everything straight. That repeating riff is what it just kept coming back to. A lot of changes in this song. You know, I didn't really care for this song. However, the longer it went on, I mean, I still don't know that I like it, but I don't know that I don't, right? I think the more you listen to it, this song might get really, really good. And I also think it suffers the fact that the 3 songs before it were so freaking good. Sometimes it's hard, that next song, if it's not up on that level, you're like, oh man, this song isn't there. So that's a difficult thing. That's where you have an advantage if you know this album really well. And the more you listen down, so I always say the more you listen to an album, the more you like it, the great majority of the time. Still a good song. Keyboard work in there good. And I mean, we just did a bunch of different sounds in there, a bunch of different change ups. But the keys, just that dun, 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 it's in my head right now. Now we're going to move to the second side. We have Dodo / Lurker. One of the only other songs I don't have anything on. Let's check it out. Dodo / Lurker. Dodo is about the first 5 minutes of the song, and Lurker's the last 2.5. It's not really 2 different songs, though. It's just 2 different parts because it continues the story. But, you know, the lyrics, I mean, this whole song is definitely prog, right? Or, I mean, it's as close to it as you're going to get. Just even the lyrics are very, very abstract. You know, Fishy got a hook in his throat. Fishy got problems. Where does he go? What does he do? Does he hope he's too small to pour a haul, who will end up being thrown back in the sea? I'm back in the sea. And then the Lurker song, the same chorus repeats itself twice. Clothes of brass and hair of brown, seldom need to breathe, don't need no wings to fly, oh, and a heart of stone, and a fear of fire and water, who am I? So the band said it was a riddle, and the band said it was a submarine, but then some people say they didn't say that. I couldn't find it totally attributed to them, but just an FYI. I think this is Phil in the whole song, but I mean, at the start of it, he changes up for one of the verses. I think it's the second verse. Let me look up here. Yeah, he changes up his voice in the second verse. So I was pretty convinced it was somebody else, but then he does it again on Lurker. So I think it is Phil. He's just changing things up. But let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that, guys, because nothing's attributed to anybody on this song. Great guitar work on this one. Of course, the keyboards and the drumming are good, but great guitar work on this one. But yeah, man, this is prog rock right here. I'll go to our next track, Who Done It? Banks described it as a, quote, real one-off piece featuring drums, guitar, and a Prophet 5 analog synthesizer. He obtained the tracks to sort of keyboard sound by changing his presets as he played the notes. He pushed Collins and Rutherford to record what ideas he had for the track, to which Collins wrote a lyric. The band improvised on top of the track for 30 minutes, which was cut into a 3-minute arrangement, one of the shortest songs on here. While the group were deciding the final track listing for Abacab, Atlantic Records producer Ahmet Erdogan, one of the most famous record guys ever, believed Who Done It should be included. That's high praise. Who Done It? I think it helps to understand the origin of the song. There was a 30-minute jam. It was basically based on the keys that we talked about at the start. And it helps frame it up. You know, there are no lyrics to this thing, really. I mean, it's was it you or was it me? Was it he or she? Was it A or B, or was it X or Z? And then we get that Who Done It in there, and I didn't do it in the pre-chorus and then the chorus. But we know, yeah. This is the only song on here so far. I do not like this song at all. I don't think it would grow on me. I find the riff annoying, but man, you're not gonna hit every one of them out of the park, man. But just didn't care for this one. I mean, maybe it would grow on me, who knows? But yeah, this one's not for me, but that's all right because plenty others are. Now we go to Man on the Corner. Went to 41 in the UK, 40 in the US, so barely popped in that top 40. Written by Phil, so this is Phil's solo written thing on here. The lyrics describe a man who spends his days on a street corner shouting at passerbys, according to the radio show In the Studio with Red Beard, which spotlighted the making of this album. This was Collins' first song about the homeless epidemic and society's reluctance to help the homeless or find a resolution. Near the end of the 80s, of course, he would revisit this theme in Another Day in Paradise, a fantastically powerful song. Backed by a simple drum machine beat, the song takes a musically dark tone. The song makes prominent use of the Roland TR-808 drum machine at the beginning, then switches to a drum set during the bridge, while the drum machine continues to run in the background throughout the entire song. So it's kind of that drumming production that Kev was talking about in the beginning that's so good on this, and also made Collins a sought-after guy to do this for other artists in the 80s. According to Tony Banks, this song features 2 tracks of the Prophet 5, recorded separately in the studio with mainly factory voices because Phil wrote the song on a stock, unreprogrammed Prophet 5. The song was reproduced live on a Prophet 10, basically 2 Prophet 5s in one by allocating the different pitches on each of the keyboards. All right, Phil is doing the lead and backing vocals and drums and that Roland TR-808. We got Mike Rutherford on bass and guitar fills, and of course Tony on the keyboards. Okay, the drum machine on there was actually fantastic, right? It can go either way, especially in the 80s, but since Phil's a master at the drums, he's the guy you want doing it. It gave that like bass line to the entire song, right? It was just a constant throughout there and so well done. And when the other drumming comes in midway through, but I'll tell you what, this is the first song on here that is about the lyrics, right? Phil's vocal performance, you feel the emotion in it. Starts out, see the lonely man there in the corner. What he's waiting for, I don't know, but he waits every day now. He's just waiting for something to show. And nobody knows him and nobody cares because there's no hiding place. There's no hiding place for you. So you don't like to go by him and see him, right? It's uncomfortable for you. Later on, it's looking everywhere at no one. He sees everything and nothing at all. Oh, when he shouts, nobody listens. Where he leads, no one will go. He's a lonely man there on the corner. Are we just like all the rest? We're looking too hard for something he's got or moving too fast to rest? Just like the lonely man on the corner, what he's waiting for. I don't know. It's a very powerful song, man. And one of the hot buttons here for me in America is that we have so many people who go hungry and so many people are homeless. And so many people who say, well, they got themselves in that situation. They can go, look, man, there's a lot of things that get people into homelessness, right? And not all of them choose it. And most of them don't choose it. You know, between mental illness, but also physical illness. Have yourself a catastrophic medical event in the United States and see how quickly it takes you to run out of money. It doesn't take long, trust me. So this song is just really well done. Quite different on the album, which is good. I think it came at a good point to switch things up. We got 2 tracks left. We got Like It or Not. This is the one written by Mike Rutherford. Like It or Not, written by Mike Rutherford. So he had a couple different instances in there when he had some good guitar runs in there, but he also gave Tony some room to move there on the keys. And then the drumming by Phil was really good too. I mean, this is more a standard song that you would think without the prog elements in it. It's really about a girl who, you know, she kind of messes this guy over and he says, I've had enough of it finally, and you're out on the street. But then as the song progresses, well, I haven't been with anyone since you because I can't get over you. So there's still a chance for us. What do you think? You know, so he can't get rid of her, man. And that's just the way it is in life a lot of times. You can't get over somebody. But I thought that was a really well done song. Now we're on to our last track. I don't have anything on it. Another Record. Let's finish this thing off. Another Record. Great drum fills on here by Phil. Powerful drum fills. Very similar to Man on the Corner lyrically, right? Theme-wise, because it's about a musician this time that doesn't have a place to go. It starts out as funny, you know, because there's an old rock and roller. He's got nowhere to go. Did you ever think of taking him in? Somebody help him. Somebody please put another record on because he likes that song. It's funny how, you know, he's never done nothing, done nobody wrong. Didn't think about changing his name, but I'm going to tell him it's the same old game. Put another record on. So I thought that was a really well done song. I thought the writing on the last 3 songs came to the forefront a little bit more. Now we're going to my favorite tracks, but first let's get Kev's. He said Abacab, Me and Sarah Jane, Dodo / Lurker, Another Record, Man on the Corner, Like It or Not. He's got a lot of favorites. He says all the others are honorable mentions. My honorable mentions are going to be No Reply at All, Me and Sarah Jane, Dodo / Lurker. Like it or not, because the guitar work on there is fantastic. My favorite is going to be Man on the Corner, and Abacab is the best song on here. No shade thrown at Another Record. I thought that's a good song, and I almost threw it on my honorable mentions. Keep It Dark also, like I said, it probably grown me. The only miss for me on here is Who Done It, which can bring me an overall score. First for Kev, he says he's at a 9.0. Obviously, he knows this album a lot better than I do. First listen for me, though, I'm going to be really high on it, man. I'm at an 8.25. It's musicianship, just top-notch musicianship. I think Phil sounds great on it, obviously. I think, with the electronic drums on there, that is kind of a cool feature. Obviously, Banks on the keyboards and pianos. He's a maestro on those things. And then Rutherford's guitar playing, it sometimes gets forgotten just in the style of music they were playing, and especially if they're playing in the 70s. But obviously, he's going to have success later on in the 80s with Mike and the Mechanics. But just a really, really well-done album that I don't ever hear brought up. Like, I'd never even heard of this album, and obviously, I'd never listened to it. But a great one brought by Kev once again. Let me know what you think of this album, boy. What are your favorite tracks? What else should I check out from Genesis? I know most of you are going to point me back to that mid-70s period when they were really prolific with Gabriel. But so let me know what you think, guys. And until next time, I will see you.